2,000 years ago, at the dawn of the first century, the world was ruled from Rome, and Rome was in turmoil. Civil war had engulfed the empire's capital city. Dictators seized power, and the Roman future seemed bleak. But from the chaos, the Roman Empire would rise stronger and more dazzling than ever before. Within a few short years, it would stretch from Britain across Europe to southern Egypt, from North Africa around the Mediterranean to the Middle East. It would embrace hundreds of languages and religions, and would till those diverse cultures into a rich soil from which Western civilization would grow. Rome would become the world's first and most enduring superpower, spanning continents and epochs. The glory days of Rome were studded with names that reach out to us across 2 millennia: Ovid and Nero, Seneca and Caligula. But the story of Rome is more than the story of famous men, and millions of less familiar figures struck different chords in the symphony of empire. People such as the wealthy benefactor, Eumacia, the rebel queen, Boudica, and countless uncelebrated soldiers and slaves, senators and peasants. And above them all, this man, Caesar Augustus. This was the emperor who set the tone for the astonishing resonance of Rome. This series tells the story of Augustus and his people, the men and women who wrested order from chaos, shaped the greatest empire the world had ever seen, and launched the Roman Empire in the 1st century. "2,000 years after Egypt's pharaohs reigned supreme, 400 years after the flowering of Greek culture, 300 years after Alexander the Great, a boy named Octavian was born in a small Italian town. The child would one day be called Augustus, and his birth, one ancient historian tells us, would be gilded by legend.
His father, leading an army through distant lands, went to a sacred grove, seeking prophecy on the boy's future. When wine was poured on the altar, flames shot up to heaven, a sign seen only once before by Alexander the Great. The priest declared that Augustus would be ruler of the world.
The story is told by Suetonius. Writing at the turn of the 1st century, he based his biography on eyewitness accounts, on common gossip, and on research conducted as imperial librarian. In truth, he writes, the prospects of young Augustus were far from grand. The boy was sickly, with few connections. His family were country people. His father, the first in their line to join the Senate. But worse, Augustus was born into dangerous times. Civil war had flared for decades. Feuding nobles, many controlling large armies, fought to gain power for themselves. And Rome's traditions of open government were often trampled underfoot. So too were innocent bystanders. When Augustus was just 4 years old, his father suddenly died. Without a male mentor, the boy's future looked bleak. But in 49 BC, when he was 13, Augustus's fortune took a dramatic turn. For in that year, his great-uncle, Julius Caesar, gained the upper hand on the battlefield. Leading an army across the Rubicon River, Caesar declared himself master of Rome and ruler of an empire still aspiring to greatness.
At the time of Julius Caesar, the Roman Empire was a little bit like a boy who's reached 6 feet tall, and yet he's only 14 or 15 years old. He's not yet a man. The externals of empire were there. The armies were there. The Romans governed most of the coast of the Mediterranean, with the exception of Egypt. However, they had not yet learned to bring that into a functioning organism.
The past decades of internal fighting had weakened the empire. Northern tribes harried the borders. Enemies were confronting Rome in the east, and the province of Spain threatened to break free. Julius Caesar moved quickly to bolster the frontiers and his own legacy. Caesar had no heir, so when Augustus completed a dangerous mission, Caesar adopted the teenager in his will.
Augustus realized here was a tremendous opportunity. Mind you, he had no military training, but he was the heir of the greatest political figure that was on the Roman sky literally at that time, and he cashed in on it.
It was a heady opportunity for Augustus, but also a perilous challenge. For in 44 BC, foreigners were not the only threat to stability. There were enemies within Caesar's small circle of advisors. They murdered Caesar at a meeting of the Senate. For the second time in his life, Augustus lost a father. But now on the verge of manhood, he thrust himself into the maelstrom of Roman politics.
The death of Julius Caesar was not just a turning point in Augustus's life, it was a turning point in world history. He was extremely young at this time, only in his 19th year. And yet, when he knew that he had been made Caesar's heir, he immediately took up the political legacy of Caesar and entered the mainstream of Roman politics, didn't hesitate to try to avenge his father, but that meant, of course, stepping onto the stage of politics, raising an army, and immediately immersing himself in a contest for supreme political power at Rome.
He displayed brutality against enemy prisoners. Once, when a father and son were begging for their lives, he ordered they should draw lots to determine which would be executed. The father offered himself, and so was killed. Because of this, the son committed suicide. Augustus watched them both die.
Suetonius describes the crisis as trial by fire, and Augustus didn't flinch from the task. He formed a strategic alliance with Mark Antony, a powerful general who also wanted supremacy. Together, they massacred their enemies in the capital. Then they pursued their rivals to the shores of Greece, where they fought and won two of the bloodiest battles in Roman history. When the carnage